In addition, when one practices samadhi bhavana, the chitta can drop into a calm state quickly, because the mindfulness which controls and guards the heart and the work that one is doing are both within oneself. It is like looking after an animal which one can catch and put to work as one wants without trouble, and it never acts up or does anything dangerous, as may happen if one lets it go its own way. Yatha Gamma. When one tries to watch and control the chitta the whole time, even though one still cannot attain full concentration and calm as one may wish, yet it will also not go wandering about looking for things to do to create more gamma and difficulty for oneself. When one tries to watch and control the chitta the whole time, even though one still cannot attain full concentration and calm as one may wish, yet it will also not go wandering about looking for things to do to create more gamma and difficulty for oneself, as it would if one had let it go its own way. Chapter 14. The Importance of Mindfulness. Guarding the chitta most of the time or the whole time is the way to promote mindfulness and the chitta so as to make it competent in the work of samadhi bhavana and in other kinds of work also. For then, whatever type of work is done deliberately, with mindfulness to keep one's attention on that work, and it will tend to be elegant and free from fault. As to oneself, one will not be a playboy wasting one's life in dissipation, but a person or bhikkhu who keeps within his level or status and does not act in ways that diminish his status and the standard of his work so that it becomes despicable. Therefore the saying that mindfulness is desirable in all circumstances is correct and most appropriate and cannot be disputed. The necessity of mindfulness will come to be seen when one practices samadhi bhavana or one investigates Dhamma in all its different aspects. In work of this kind, it is essential that mindfulness should go along with it at every moment in order that one may be able to know what is happening to the chitta and Dhamma with enough precision for one's purpose. This becomes increasingly important for those whose ground of chitta and ground of Dhamma are above the normal level, and right up to the highest levels, mindfulness is still an essential Dhamma every time and it cannot be dispensed with. In fact, whatever acuteness, strength, and capability of wisdom one has, it depends on mindfulness to support it and promote it. So even if wisdom is about to reach the ground of great wisdom, mahapanya, it gives an indication to mindfulness that it also must reach the ground of great mindfulness, mahasati, because mindfulness is that device of Dhamma which leads the way in all kinds of work. Ordinary people like ourselves who are at times unmindful display characteristics at those times which are unseemly and inelegant, and in those cases where they let go of mindfulness in a big way, as if they have lost all interest, it seems that the time has come for them to be taken off to an institution for certain. It is for the above reasons that those who practice the way and attain Dhamma do so either slowly or quickly, depending upon the strength of their mindfulness and wisdom, which are very important. And this is true even allowing for differences in character. Therefore, those who urgently drive themselves to develop mindfulness will soon find that samadhi appears, and their thoughts and insights in the direction of wisdom will come much more quickly than otherwise. It makes me think about the task of writing a book such as this one, for it becomes quite clear how, on a day when mindfulness slips and drifts about due to a lot of confused thoughts, one's writing is full of mistakes, confusion, and many corrections. But on a day when the heart is not confused and one has mindfulness present, one's writing is mostly correct and good, with little need for any corrections. Those who are well known and renowned for their abilities in the chitta and Dhamma are generally those who have mindfulness and who are able to see the importance of it. So they try to establish mindfulness the whole time without letting their minds slip into forgetfulness. In particular, when they do samadhi bhavana as well as the investigation of all forms of Dhamma, their mindfulness and wisdom must blend into one another all the time, and they do not allow them to be present sometimes and absent at others. Whoever acts and lives like that will have Dāgara Dhamma, the Dhamma which wakes and arouses him to be vigilant, within himself wherever he goes and in whatever he does. He has a means of protecting himself which is strong and lasting, so it is difficult for an enemy to reach him, and there is no danger to his heart. This is entirely different from those who are not mindful and who accumulate dukkha, and however much they have, they go on accepting it to the end. Venerable Ajaan Mun taught the need for mindfulness very frequently and most insistently, regardless of the type of practice being used, the posture, or whether it concerned someone who was just beginning or one who had done it for a long time. In all cases, he was certain to teach the need for mindfulness, along with other things, to suit the level of citta and Dhamma of the person who came to learn from him. He said how he had seen the bad effect of being without mindfulness, as well as the virtue of having mindfulness present from when one first starts to put forward the effort to do the practice, right through until one has reached the final goal. He also said how both of these were very important factors which one cannot afford to neglect, and to give confidence to those who practice the way, he said, regardless of age or sex, if those who do the practice have interest in and pay attention to mindfulness all the time in all postures and situations, and not in fits and starts, they should have the hope and expectation that the attainment of samadhi, samapatti, as well as the path, fruition, and nibbana will not be beyond their reach. From the time when one first starts the training, one should set up mindfulness as one's constant companion and guardian. Then one's sense of oneself, of the right and wrong, and the good and evil, which arise in oneself and others, whatever it may be, one will be able to know for sure, and this will steadily increase while one remains mindful. At the same time, one will not let go into absent mindfulness, which would allow the kilesas to drag out and steal the good that is in one and swallow the lot. If one can do this, one should have firm hope and expectation indeed. Yet, generally speaking, those who practice the way of Dhamma turn and become those who blame Dhamma, saying, "It hasn't given the results which it should," or "It gives me no results when I do the practice," because those kilesas which lead them into absent mindfulness sneak in to take over the duty of mindfulness by getting in before mindfulness, which should be the leader, and then stealthily take over the job of looking after the citta. This happens both when one is trying to strive at the practice and at all other times as well. This makes these people feel disappointed that they did not achieve what they thought they would. But instead of blaming themselves for losing out to the kilesas, they turn and blame Dhamma for giving them bad results. So they lose in all ways. This is the way of those bhikkhus who practice without taking any interest in watching the kilesas which lead them into absent mindfulness. And this is the main danger, both to oneself and to one's efforts to do the practice. This great boss, the kilesas, thus gets the opportunity to remain with the one who does the practice quite openly, without him ever becoming aware that he has been taken for a ride. If one is an observant person, one will be able to know what has happened within a minute. For when one first starts to establish the practice, in any of the various ways of doing it, by setting up mindfulness in conjunction with the effort to do it, that is the time when one will be able to see how the setting up of mindfulness and the dispersing of mindfulness will fight each other, so that one can look at it and see what happens. Then, before long, the forgetfulness which disperses mindfulness, which is nothing but the kilesas intently watching and waiting, will win and drag the citta away and disappear with it. From that moment, all that is left is the body of one who practices without mindfulness and void of effort. If he is walking chankama, all that is left is the mere activity of walking. If sitting in samadhi, then he is merely sitting. And if he is standing to ponder Dhamma, he is merely standing, just like a puppet or a doll. It is no good searching in him for the kind of effort which is put forth by those who practice the way truly, because mindfulness, which is that factor in striving to practice which gives rise to results, has been entirely consumed by the kilesas of carelessness. All that is left is the body, which is merely going through the motions of striving, and nothing else. This is how the kilesas destroy people and destroy the efforts of those who practice the way. Their destructiveness takes place right in front of one's eyes when one is fresh and conscious, by lulling one into a deep sleep of forgetfulness even while one is actually striving to practice the way. At any time, it is quite possible to know how clever the various kilesas are if one really wants to. Even when one is just beginning to work at the practice, one can get to know this without much difficulty. But generally speaking, one does not want to know. Instead, all one wants to know are the attainments of samadhi, samapatti, and the path fruition and nibbana. But what can give rise to these states of Dhamma apart from mindfulness and wisdom, which are the necessary tools for clearing the way? Certainly not careless indifference, so that one has no interest in being guarded against it, for this is what destroys all forms of Dhamma such as the above, which one wants and hopes to attain. Sometimes, when Venerable Ajaan gave a talk on Dhamma, what he said was very funny, and we who were listening could not help laughing inwardly. I can remember how funny it was, but the Dhamma that he was pointing out to us has almost gone now. He said, "If your heart was truly in your efforts to practice the way, like someone who is full of vitality and spirit, your heart would have a way in which it could develop and grow. Not like people getting into their coffins all the time, as you are now. For whenever I look nowadays, all I see is scrap bhikkhus and scrap samaneras like scrap metal, moving about and walking back and forth on the Jankama path, sluggish and ungainly, without any mindfulness or awareness within them. As for any wisdom, panya, or penetrating insight, if they are sitting in meditation, they merely sit there, like scrap iron men thrown away in a shop or a factory. But even scrap iron does not sway about, nodding forward and backwards like a person dying in the pose of striving at the practice, which is most annoying to see. As for the Kammatthana bhikkhu who sits nodding out of control, whether he falls down and dies or not is enough to trouble others who have to recite the Kusala. This is a sorry thing to see. And sometimes at night, when the crows and dogs are all asleep, if anything happens, who will come and help to arrange things so that the corpse is given a traditional human funeral? If this happens in daytime, the vultures and crows will be troubled also, for when they come flying around thinking that some food is available, they see that it is still breathing and fidgeting, and they are afraid to come too close, so they fly away and perch on a tree to wait and watch. Sometimes they think, "This is it," and they fly down to have a look at the troublesome object again, feeling sure that they will be able to have a go at it this time. But as soon as they get close, its mindfulness returns, and it looks straight at them. So they are all afraid and fly away without much hope left. But once they have flown about the place to try and find something else to eat, they come back again. Because the appearance of this one who is trying to meditate is like someone who is half dead, as if telling the crows and vultures to come back again, saying, "It's dead now, you can come and eat it." This is how it acts all the time. It's enough to make them irritated with this waste bhikkhu who keeps changing his position. This is the way of one who practices and causes irritation to the vultures, crows, and dogs, both domestic and wild. He not only causes irritation to them, but he will break the heart of the one who teaches him, which is far worse than the trouble caused to the animals who are waiting to eat the meat and bones of this bhikkhu when he dies, because he has no mindfulness to support and lift him up at all. This is a kind of practice which is an endless preparation, never stopping and never giving any results. At this point, Venerable Ajaan stopped and rested for a short while, and it seemed as if he was looking to see what was the state of mind of the bhikkhus and samaneras who were listening. What he saw was that they were all sitting quietly and undisturbed, some afraid and some amused. Then he started speaking again, as if he was answering some of their unanswered questions, saying, "How would it be to arrange a funeral service, a Kusalamadika, for a bhikkhu who is still alive? They have the merit-making ceremony Kusalapangsukula for those who are dead. If they don't have the merit-making ceremony to make merit for those bhikkhus who sit in meditation and sleep as if dead even when they are still alive, won't they all fall into hell? Even when they walk Jangama or sit in meditation, they sway back and forth as if they are about to jump down into hell while they are still alive. When the time comes for them to truly pass away, where are they going to jump to if not to the hellish abyss of perpetual sleep? We who were listening had never heard of the hellish abyss of perpetual sleep previously, but Venerable Ajaan revealed it to us at this time. After the meeting, various groups would quietly gather together to talk for a short while before breaking up and returning, each one to his own place where he worked at his meditation practice, which Venerable Ajaan had called a mortuary of half-dead bhikkhus preparing themselves for their funeral service. But as I related earlier on in this book, it was strange how none of the bhikkhus or samaneras displayed any signs of irritation, of being upset, or of discontent with what Venerable Ajaan had said in his castigating talk. For each of them heard this unusual and rather amusing talk on Dhamma with inward satisfaction and pleasure, hoping that he would not finish too soon. This was probably because of their complete faith in Venerable Ajaan, that he was in a state of complete purity, and that the ground of his citta was overflowing with metta. And for that reason, none of them ever felt inclined to criticize him in any way. In fact, instead of being repelled by the rather morbid tone of his talk, it aroused their mindfulness to reflect and see how baneful and harmful it was to be forgetful and without mindfulness internally within each one of them. While giving a talk of this kind, Venerable Ajaan's appearance and tone of voice were quite intimidating, but once he had finished he immediately returned to normal, as if he had never been like that at all. Those bhikkhus who had stayed with him for a long time, so that they had learnt to know his characteristics quite well, would talk normally with him after such a Dhamma talk, as if nothing unusual had happened just a short while ago. But those who had recently come and had just begun the training, never having been exposed to such methods of Dhamma as Venerable Ajaan used to correct and straighten their characteristics, would react in various ways when suddenly coming up against it in this way. Some would fidget and move about. Others would become conscious of aches and pains, or of getting hot or cold, without having enough mindfulness to be able to restrain themselves and be self-controlled. Like what happened when a dog was picked up and thrown onto the body of a dead tiger. It got so frightened all it could do was to make grunting sounds, jump away, and run for its life. What was unexpected was that it left part of itself spread all over the body of that tiger. But what was it that it left behind spread all over the tiger which had so frightened it? As for the dog, it had fled without restraint. Generally, those bhikkhus who went to receive training under Venerable Ajaan were, to begin with, rather like that dog, thrown onto the dead tiger. They did not have enough mindfulness to control themselves as they should, and standing, walking, sitting, or lying down, they were always afraid that he would only criticize and scold them. But they did not think of the underlying reasons why he should do this, which are far more frightening than that dead tiger was to that dog. Footnote. To say that dogs are frightened of tigers is an understatement. In fact, they are terrified of them. If they meet a tiger, whatever shit they have in their bowels, it all pours out. But generally when a dog meets a tiger, it becomes petrified and cannot run away. It just stands there stiff and shits. Even when one picks up a dog and throws it onto a dead tiger, as related above, the same thing happens. And this is because of a deep-rooted instinct in canines which have always had this fear. Those people who live in and about the forests where tigers roam are bound to know how dogs react to tigers. But those of you who have lived in the cities or in Bangkok all your lives may not know about this, or you may not believe it. But in fact, this is true and correct. Note: this footnote is part of the original Thai text. But those who had been under training with Venerable Acharya for a long time, the more he scolded them, the more it became like a remedy which quickly cured their sickness. And no sick person is going to get angry and resentful with the doctor, who quickly gives him some medicine to help him overcome that sickness which is bearing down on him so that he cannot save himself. Instead, he is likely to be grateful and thankful towards the doctor who can find a way to save his life, which he, the doctor, does because he has the metta to give help to others. Those who practice the way and see the danger of being stupid, which is due to their own kilesas bearing down on them and piling up against them, will be happy and smile with contentment at such strong yet kindly teaching. This teaching, which is given with the aim of curbing and curing their own kilesas, and it comes from an acharya whose chitta is full of metta and thoughts of helping others in all sorts of ways to get free from, to avoid, and evade the kilesas and a massive suffering, and not to give way, lie down submerged and defeated, completely subject to the power of the kilesas which always bear down and force one towards destruction and ruin.